Hey, aloha everyone. Welcome to the September Slice of PI-CASC seminar hosted by the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center, or PI-CASC. For those of you joining us in person, if you see that everyone's helping themselves to some lunch, if you haven't, please do so. And for those of us joining online, we just ask if you could mute your microphones and turn your cameras off. That would be great. My name is Ryan Longman. I'm the PI-CASC University Consortium Director. Also director of the Hawaii Climate Data Portal and a co-lead on the Pacific Drought Knowledge Exchange. This Slice of PI-CASC seminar series provides a venue for sharing state-of-the-art climate adaptation research and science to management applications in Hawaii and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the PI-CASC website under the news and events. We'll have some time for questions at the end of the presentation. For those of you joining online, you can leave questions in the chat or you can just hold them to the end. We'll be sure to acknowledge you and give you an opportunity to ask them. Today, we are excited to have Dr. Elliot Parsons joining us. He flew over this morning from the Kona side of the Big Island to tell us about knowledge and gaps to action, how Pacific RISCC bridges science and management for Pacific Island resilience. Dr. Parsons is a specialist for the Pacific Regional Invasive Species and Climate Change Network. It's funded by PI-CASC. He began his studies in cultural anthropology at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And then he went on to switch gears and pursue a PhD in wildlife biology from the University of Montana. He spent some time in Costa Rica teaching a fields course. And in 2010, he made his way to Hawaii and took a job as the Pu'uwawa coordinator. In his current position, he's been there since May of 2022. If you don't know Elliot, let me tell you, he's thriving in this role. I'm sure many of you know. If you're on an email thread with the Pacific RISCC, you know you're getting lots of information, good quality information. He's passionate about his research. He's also an avid outrigger canoe paddler. He took a 10-year break, but he's back. I personally started working with Elliot in 2020, the pilot of the Pacific Drought Knowledge Exchange. He actually was on the proposal that got the funding. We worked collaboratively, and since that time, we've worked on several other things. He's been a big supporter of our work, and I've been a big supporter of his work. Let's welcome Elliot to the stage. Yeah.
Boom. Thanks so much, everyone, for having me, for inviting me to speak about Pacific RISCC and our work. It's great to see so many familiar faces and a few new ones. And I'm excited to share with you about what this amazing group has been up to over the last few years and some of our accomplishments. And a big thank you as well to all of the founding members of Pacific RISCC and the core team members who meet monthly and have worked tirelessly to help keep this going. It's not switching. Oh, okay, it's just a delay. So thanks, Ryan, for the great introduction. And I just wanted to start really quickly with my conservation natural resource management journey in Hawaii. Moved to Hawaii Island in 2010 to work for a watershed partnership for a couple of years, and then with the DLNR as coordinator and manager of the Pu'uwawa State Forest Reserve. And this is really where I cut my teeth on invasive species issues and really learned how significant the challenges were with invasive species in Hawaii and the Pacific Islands. Pu'uwawa was part of about 104,000 acres of state land that I worked with a team to help coordinate resource management and activities on the dry side or the leeward side of Hawaii Island and North Kona. Um, and this isn't, oh, I'm gonna get rid of this. This isn't me, but this is how I started my journey trying to control invasive fountain grass. And for anyone who has tried to control some of the non-native and invasive flammable grasses here, it's very difficult with a lot of lava to use a Pulaski. And after just a couple of weeks, I started to destroy my body and think there must be better ways to do this, and really started to reach out and find partners and collaborators. While I was there, I saw quite a few significant invasive species impacts. This is in one of the lowland dry forest sections on the left side of Puvava. And you can see the understory is pretty much a blanket of invasive fountain grass. There's non-native and invasive silver oak trees in the surrounding area as well. And this is a native and endangered holopepe tree trying desperately to hang on. If the drought and competition with the invasive plants wasn't enough, this tree was infested by the agricultural pest, the banana moth, and led to the mortality of about half of the holopepe in this region. So this was one of a few fairly significant invasion events that I saw when I was there. This is another one. A lot of you are probably familiar with the native Willy Willy tree. It's endemic, really important culturally. It's made into surfboards and fishing floats, ama for outrigger canoes, paddles. It's very lightweight and floats, which gives it a lot of utility. We found during the height of the Willy Willy gall wasp invasion, which was basically decimating the ability of these trees to produce leaves and fruit, that they were also being girdled by non-native goats. And so in many instances, native species and ecosystems were not just affected by one invasive species, but they were being hit from all angles, from insects and plants and drought and wildfire. And so that kind of led me to an interest in what can we do about invasive species in the Pacific, and eventually I think led me to Pacific RISCC. And so for the next few minutes, while I have you guys here, I wanted to talk about the vulnerability of islands to invasive species, the need for better biosecurity, the fact that climate change does need to be considered. I want to talk about Pacific RISCC and the RISCC network and our work at this nexus, the intersection of climate change and invasive species in the Pacific. And then I'll have a quick future opportunities for us to finish off. So to start off with island vulnerability to invasive species. This was an article that came out just a few years ago. There was a whole series of these that started with scientists warning, which could, like catch your interest. The outstanding biodiversity of islands is in peril. And they pointed out that islands, though they make up only 6.7% of the land surface area on Earth, they harbor about 20% of Earth's biodiversity. So they're really significant in the conservation of biodiversity ecosystems on the planet. And we know that invasive species are driving the biodiversity and conservation crisis in the Pacific region. The Pacific Islands are the invasive species capital of the world, which means we have some of the highest densities, richness, and abundance of non-native and invasive species compared to anywhere on the planet, and across many different taxonomic groups. You're probably familiar with some of the species in this picture. And these invasive species have really detrimental impacts on biodiversity, in particular endemic species, many of which are rare in Pacific Islands, such as Hawaii. And this figure, I think, shows, how critically endangered many of these species are. So Hawaii makes up less than 1% of the US land area, but it contains more than 40% of all federally listed threatened and endangered species. So in particular, islands and Pacific Islands are very vulnerable for many reasons. The high endemicity is one. low population sizes, and a lot of them do not have defenses against the species that have arrived. And as a result of this, we have programs that I'm sure many or all of you are familiar with, where we have to have a special program for the species that are at most critical need. And so the Plant Extinction Prevention Program is one example. You don't get on the PEP list unless you have fewer than 50 wild individuals remaining. So this, I think, shows kind of how dire things can be. There's also the Snail Extinction Prevention Program, which does similar work for Hawaii's endangered snails. One of the things we've done with Pacific RISCC is try to find reports and highlight some of the key takeaways. This is one that came out just a couple of years ago, the IPBES report. It was the first comprehensive global report on invasive species out in 2023. What they found through years and years of work is that invasive species have played a role in 60% of global species extinctions and are the sole driver of 16% of recorded extinctions. But when you focus in on islands and, push two buttons instead of one. When you focus in on islands, invasive species are responsible for almost 90% of recorded extinctions. So invasive species are amongst the most important impacts to ecosystems and native species in the Pacific region. And one more thing to highlight with the vulnerability, there's something called the TENS rule. It's been around for a long time. And the TENS rule basically was a back of the hand or envelope calculation. And it suggested that if you were to introduce 1,000 species, then maybe 100% will start to establish. I'm getting there. Sorry. You bring in 1,000. The TENS rules basically suggest that 10% of those are going to start and spread and have impacts. And so this was looked at, and this is a summary from one of our partners in the Northeast RISCC. I've got to get used to the lag here. They confirm this 10% rule with mainland and continental or polar climates, which is super interesting. But they found that for tropical islands, invasion rates are about 33%. So that means that 33% of the plants that we're bringing in, at least this looked at plants, are going to become naturalized. They're going to establish. They're going to start spreading on their own, and they're going to have detrimental impacts. So islands are really, really vulnerable. That's the big point here. And what is at stake? Everything is at stake for us. Cultural traditions, cultural practices, livelihood, culturally important species, endemic and native biodiversity, agricultural plants, food security, even how intact coastlines can be affected by invasive species. I want to shift now to the need for better biosecurity, now that maybe I've scared everybody thoroughly. I've shown this, and it's a little bit hard to see, but this is a USGS report looking at the density of non-native species richness. So if you look at Alaska, each dot represents one different non-native species. This work showed that the density of non-native species is about 260 times higher in Hawaii as a case study compared to the continental US. So you might think, well, all the species are here already, right? Well, no, that's not true. There's still a lot of species that are arriving. This is a graph from work by Kelsey Brock and Kurt Daler back in 2021. And this plotted out naturalized plants in Hawaii. So naturalized means they've established they're spreading on their own. And they found that the average rate is we actually get about 12 new recorded species per year. You can see over the last few decades that rate might have actually increased a little bit. So species are still arriving and they're still naturalizing, and they're still likely going to cause a lot of problems for us. The damage costs are significant. This is results from the InvaCost database, something we looked at with Pacific RISCC. And it basically found out all of these invasions are causing massive damage um, to all different sectors. And when you add them all up, Hawaii and the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands, the cost of invasive species was more than the sum of all other natural hazards combined. And that's storms, which make up a good amount, drought, earthquakes, floods, volcanic activity. So these invasions are having a lot of impact. And I want to point everyone we just sent this out yesterday. And this is work by the Invasive Species Advisory Committee. And I just wanted to focus in on this quote from the summary we sent out. When adjusted by land area, damages and losses due to invasive species have cost the U.S. and U.S. affiliated islands more than 7 times the cost of the continental U.S. So invasive species are here, they're still arriving, they're causing a lot of damage, and it's hugely, hugely expensive. So what are we worried about? We're worried about primary introductions. So that's introductions of new species coming in from the outside. This is an example with the Hawaiian archipelago. I don't know if the Yeti has been found here, but I found a good reference online that suggests high densities in the Pacific Northwest. So, there's a chance of introduction here. We got to be careful with this one. There's examples in the news all the time of these primary introductions being found or detected. This is one, a possum caught in a big box store in Kona. I love this expression. He might be so shocked because this, I think, was the 4th or 5th possum that was found that he was reporting on over about a 12-month period. We've all got to be careful about the upcoming opossum apocalypse. But we're also worried about secondary spreads. So once a non-native species gets here, the likelihood of that species moving around has gone up significantly. And it's another aspect of spread that we've got to worry about. A couple examples of spread are, I guess, one example with little fire ant. You can fit a whole colony of little fire ants inside one macadamia nut shell. So it's super easy for something like that to fall into a truck or vehicle and be transported across an island and spread. And when you look at some of the information out there, this is from a presentation given by Brooke with the Maui Invasive Species Committee. You can see showing up on Kauai and Hawaii in 1999, and then Maui 2009, Oahu, and then Lanai. The point is we really have to keep species from getting here to Hawaii in the first place, because once they're here, most likely they're going to start to spread. And Kelsey Brock with plants, I think, measured this to be about, I think it was like every 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a species jump on average across from one island to another. So what we need to do, we need to identify the invasion pathways. That's the route by which invasive species get here. And which ones are most important, and then figure out ways of mitigating those pathways to prevent spread. Okay, climate change needs to be considered. There are quite a variety of climate impacts in the Pacific, from ocean warming and acidification, sea level rise. We've got severe drought that's increased over the last 100 years, increasing wildfires. The causes can be complex for some of these. They relate not just to climate change, but also land use is a huge factor. And we have some really important projected future climate impacts, such as changes in rainfall amounts or shifts in timing. We expect increased storm intensity. All of these climate impacts can affect and exacerbate invasions. I really like this figure that Eva Kohlberg put together from Northwest RISCC. It goes into some of the mechanisms behind this interaction. So as an example, an A, species might shift their ranges to follow the preferred climate niche as temperature and moisture shifts. B, pathways might change. There's a lot of interest in pathways that are opening up, for example, in the Arctic. And it's not just new routes, but potentially increased survivability of propagules while they're being transported. The phenology can affect invasive species, where you might get one seed set of an invasive plant, you might get multiple with a longer growing season. D, there's evidence for the reduced efficacy of herbicides with increasing CO2 concentrations. E, native species can be impacted by invasions, which can make them more susceptible to other things like drought and competition with other species. And then finally, F, I think it's supposed to be flooding, disturbances, in particular climate-related disturbances such as drought, more severe storms, can move invasive species around and also create a place for invasive species to move in and establish. In the Pacific region, we focused in on a few of these as being of interest. One is shifting ranges and distribution. So generally with climate change, the big predictions are species are expected to move towards the poles, up in elevation or to deeper depths. I've got some new research towards the end of the talk to share that we're kind of looking into range shifts for the Pacific region. One of our big examples of this, of course, is native Hawaiian forest birds. These two species on Kauai, the akikiki and akeke, have been declining towards extinction as mosquitoes have gone to higher and higher elevations with warming. And they carry avian malaria and avian pox. And these forest birds are highly, highly susceptible. I think a study with Evie, and that's the red bird with the amazing curved beak. When they, a few decades ago, when they did challenge experiments, the mortality was almost 100%. So every bird that got infected pretty much died. We're also really interested in the Pacific region in storm severity, and we've done some work with the Pacific RISCC that I'll talk about in a minute, asking the question, how do these severe storms affect invasive species? Coconut rhinoceros beetle is one of the big ones we've been interested in and looking at. And there's some evidence from Guam that after severe storms, the accumulation of green waste becomes a perfect breeding site for the coconut rhinoceros beetle, allowing them to increase populations and impact. I want to thank Jeff for this slide. One of the reasons why I'm giving you all this information about invasions and climate change and how things might shift is something that managers here know really well, that these large-scale invasive species management efforts are hugely expensive. And so we need to be as strategic as possible in where we put our funding. So if that means an invasive species is going to increase greatly in abundance and impact, we might want to divert more resources towards that. If one is going to decline and not be as big of an issue, we might want to divert resources away from that. Okay, so Pacific RISCC. So who are we and what do we do? I've thought a lot about some of the guiding questions. These aren't official guiding questions, but they're questions that have kind of guided my thinking on this topic. And that's, how can we best adapt invasive species management here to a changing climate? And that's more focused on the invasive species side, but we also want to bridge the climate change side too. So looking at the other side, how can we best incorporate invasive species considerations in a climate change plans, guidance, and policy? So the formation of the Pacific RISCC, or Regional Invasive Species Climate Change Management Network, was to highlight a few of these things, facilitate and strengthen manager researcher communities, translate and share relevant research and knowledge at the nexus, and then assess needs and priorities and help fill gaps. And the Pacific RISCC was initiated in 2019 at a forum at HCC, and it expanded from Hawaii to include all the US-affiliated Pacific Islands over the last few years. And many of our core team members, founding members, and affiliates are here. And a big thanks to all of them for helping to elevate this work. We also added a science advisory team. We wanted additional input from both managers and researchers to kind of help guide the directions of Pacific RISCC. So we established this group in 2023 with 11 folks to expand our reach and give us more ideas for what we can do to address the nexus. This is our area, a very large area. Represents over 2,000 islands, over 20 languages spoken. The state of Hawaii, 3 US territories, and 3 independent nations that are part of the Compact of Free Association. One of the big documents that really got Pacific RISC running was this survey done by the founding team members. And it went online and was shared back in 2021. And it was led by Dr. Laura Burrington with Pacific RISCC. And one of the big takeaways is that managers in Hawaii, because this was mostly Hawaii specific at the time before it expanded, most managers are concerned about the effects of climate change on invasive species, but are not satisfied with existing products and tools. And there are a couple graphs that I wanted to highlight really quick. One was desired climate products and services that laid out things such as we want to see better communication, better understanding of uncertainty, more climate projections at appropriate scales, more collaborative projects. And then another one, and these two graphs really kind of helped drive me in terms of what I tried to focus on the last few years. And this was priority climate research topics. There was a lot of interest in this area for range shifting species, as well as resilience of native communities and changes in extreme events. So we've done a lot to try to meet some of these interests. So now I want to share a couple examples of our work at the Nexus. I'm going to break it into a few things. I thought long and hard about what we do and tried to break it into, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things. So facilitated network is probably the biggest one. Create stronger manager researcher communities, promote knowledge exchange, translate relevant research, and include management considerations, and then fill knowledge gaps. And I'm going to mention a couple things about each of those, and then I'll let you go to lunch after that if you haven't had it yet. So the first one, facilitated network. This was one of the biggest projects when I started growing the network, trying to increase the number of people coming to events and partners and collaborators. It was super fun to put this slide together. So we have our Pacific RISCC core and science teams. We've got all the folks that are part of that. And then we have all of these agencies and institutions that our core and science team members represent. And that gives us a lot of coverage to be able to find partners and collaborators and see what we can do to provide things for our stakeholders. And from that, branching out to partners and collaborators, I know I'm missing some here, so apologies, I wasn't able to fit everybody, but I started to think about all the different collaborators we have worked with, and there are quite a few. And so you see this kind of like outside circle of all these different folks being kind of pulled in to work on projects that are mutually beneficial to these organizations as well as Pacific RISCC. And then branching out from that, who's our audience? Mostly managers and practitioners, researchers, land and ocean stewards, decision makers, policymakers. And who are we reaching? It's actually quite a broad array of different sectors, national, federal, local, and state agencies, the community, private, as well as nonprofit and NGOs. So we've been able to infiltrate outwards and pull a lot of folks in, and so we can work with them on projects. These are a few of the things that kind of like help with the logistics of the network. We have a listserv that's currently has about 570 members. Folks on that will get email updates about all of our different events. We have our website where we post a lot of different things. And then we're part of this broader cross-RISC network. We're not the first RISC. The first RISC was started in the Northeast US. And the ideas were highly successful and they spread. And so pretty soon from the Northeast, you had RISC starting up in the Pacific Islands and the Northwest, and then the Southeast joined, North Central. And last year, Canada just created their own version of RISC as well. So this idea spread and now includes a huge portion of North America. What have we done to build stronger manager researcher communities? A lot of that has been getting people together to share ideas, And we try to have managers and researchers at the table together and make an effort to make sure that that happens. One of the reasons why I wanted to highlight why this is so important to do, this was a study done called What Managers Want from Invasive Species Research versus What They Get. And so you can see all these different topics: seed banks, response to global change, invasibility. If you're on the 0 line, that means that what managers want is being reflected by what research is actually being done. And so when you look at what they found, it's all over the map. As you move over to the right, it shows overrepresentation of topics that are being explored in depth that maybe managers aren't that interested in. And then if you look to the left of the 0 line, you see underrepresentation of all these topics that managers want to know things about. And maybe nobody's doing the work, or very few people. And when you look at, so that's basic research, when you look at applied research, you see a similar pattern. And my big point with this is that managers can't expect and hope that the work that they need to get done is going to get done. We need to help make that happen as much as possible. And there's a lot of reasons for it. We can talk about it. There's different incentive structures for research that gets done, but we need to make a concerted effort to try to get research that matches management needs. So some of the ways we do this, through workshops, through expert panels, through forums, through working groups, through symposia, through meetings. We've done it all over the last few years. And I've witnessed a lot of conversations happening, a lot of people saying they're going to stay in touch, projects being initiated as a result of this. This is one that I wanted to highlight. This is a workshop that we did back in 2023, a couple hours as part of the Hawaii Conservation Conference. And we brought together site managers from 5 different sites in Hawaii, and then had a workshop where we explored what actions we might take to adapt some of the invasive species management work to a changing climate. We use scenario planning, and that's something that we've been working with partners on lately. Scenario planning is an approach for climate adaptation where you work with a set of plausible futures, and that's really important to do because there's so much uncertainty with what's going to happen in the future. But if you can come up with a set of plausible futures, then you can come up with potential adaptation actions for those different futures and hopefully create what would be a more robust management framework for adaptation. This is another one we did last year at the Hawaii Conservation Conference. Climate-related disasters. We really leaned into severe storms for this one. The big goal for this was to try to bring together disaster and emergency response folks with invasive species folks, because those 2 silos weren't talking to each other or interacting as much as they needed to. And to just bring that climate impact, we expect that tropical cyclone intensity is going to increase. And so if storm severity is going to increase, that could lead to increased spread of invasive species. I got this video from Franny Brewer, coordinator of the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. And I just wanted to, oh, okay, I need to do something different to show it. Maybe it's clicking on it. Just wanted to show this really quick. We'll see if it works. This is after Hurricane Azelle, which I believe was in 2014. And what you're seeing are downed albizia trees, which are non-native, they're invasive, they grow rapidly, they're very brittle. During the hurricane, I can't remember if it was a hurricane when it actually hit or had been downgraded at that point, but it just caused incredible damage of downed trees everywhere, downed trees across roads and highways, on buildings, on vehicles. Certain places in Puna were not passable, I think, for weeks to months before they were able to remove some of these trees. So this is an example of how these climate-related disturbances can combine with things such as severe storms, and why we really need to consider invasive species and storms together. So we put on this 2-hour forum at the Hawaii Conservation Conference last year. We had a expert panel. The panelists included managers as well as emergency responders. And we had breakout groups and a lot of great ideas and insight into how we can improve emergency response while thinking about invasions. One more outcome of this is we came up with a list of 22 examples of how tropical storms have led to the spread of invasive species. A good list of case studies for anyone who's interested. I'm happy to share them. And these were examples that were due to the storm itself or due to the human response to the storm. So one of the underexplored areas is how emergency relief efforts can move species around. And there are some examples of that happening and invasive species that are harmful becoming established. Okay, moving into knowledge exchange and info sharing. We've done a monthly webinar series for the last few years that I think has been highly successful. We've got 38 recorded webinars that are now posted on the website from all different kinds of topics. A lot of them from researchers, some from managers looking at many different kinds of climate impacts and different invasive species. And it's become an incredible resource. And then we also kind of entered the CRB space. And one of the reasons we did was because of all the conversations I was having with managers about how confused they were about all the research on coconut rhinoceros beetle. And one of the reasons they were confused is because research, from some Pacific islands was saying different things than others, and there were these academic battles happening. And so we thought, let's just get everyone together and let's just hash it out, and we'll have them all speak and share and figure this stuff out. So we put together this inaugural CRB Science Symposium last year, hugely successful. I think it had 460 participants and nearly 1,000 views, and that was like 9 months ago, so there's probably a lot more views. But I've heard of different people using this for training for some of their staff, and that was one particular organization that I talked to. And we're doing that again, so registration is open now for the 2025 CRB Science and Management Symposium, where we're hoping to do the same thing. We've got a great lineup of speakers to try to keep continuing this conversation and helping get the word out about what work is out there and what we know and don't know. This is another example I wanted to give. This is a workshop we did at the 2024 North American Invasive Species Management Association Conference. It was in Missoula, Montana, where I went to grad school. And the idea was, there's a lot of federal programs looking at invasive species. At the time, the federal EDRR, Early Detection Rapid Response Framework, was being set up. And we were thinking, well, what can states do? Because there's things that states can do and things that the feds can do, and it's not always the same. Little did we know how important it would become to understand the state capacity for things. But we got folks together, experts, and had a brainstorming session on what are the challenges to addressing invasive species as a state or territory, and what are solutions. We're still working out our outputs and products from this, but we were able to map a lot of the challenges to different solutions. We've got a draft workshop report and then a fact sheet that's being created to get the word out about this. One of the cool things that came out about it was people usually think of funding and capacity as the two kind of biggest limiting factors, and they often are, but there were so many ideas of what institutions and agencies could do at the state or territory level that could be done with existing staff. So really excited to share more about that in the future. So when I added all this up over the last few years, it's been pretty amazing what we've been able to do as a network. Since 2019, one conference, that was the International Invasive Species and Climate Change Conference. We're doing that again in December. That was the first one. 2 symposia, 3 different workshops, 7 forums, 58 presentations. These aren't all ones that we've led. There are a few in here that we assisted with. But it's just an incredible amount of work that's been done by the team and by our partners and collaborators to get this all done over the last few years. Okay, I'm wrapping up here. Translate relevant research for managers. This has been one of the big things we've been doing too. We do these manager research summaries. We didn't come up with this idea. Northeast RISC came up with this idea. People love it though, because nobody has time to read long, complicated research articles. The idea is to take a peer-reviewed article or a tool or report and distill it down to key take-home points, management considerations, and then share that with all of the folks in our network. We've been doing that for a few years now, and we've got those all stored on the website. We've got 19, actually it should be 20 with the one we just sent out yesterday, 20 research summaries available. And they cover many different topics from climate extremes, shifting ranges, invasive species impacts. So highly worth checking out. You can become an expert on these papers. Just kidding, but you can get a sense of what they're about by reading these summaries. And then also been working with partners to adapt some of this work for a larger audience. We don't have capacity, but sometimes partners have added capacity, and this is a partnership with the Pacific Drought Knowledge Exchange that resulted in this workshop report, which is still draft, but it's almost ready to be released, and this fact sheet, which is now posted on the PDKE website, and it highlights scenario planning for climate adaptation, and the backside talks about the workshop that we put on. So huge thank you to PDKE and our team that put these together. Last one, fill research gaps. We haven't done so much of this the last few years because we didn't have that much money, but we applied for a grant, and it was funded. And so this is a relatively new research project. This is how and why are non-native species ranges shifting in the Pacific, the role of climate and invasion pathways in Hawaii and the Mariana Islands. Our group has grown a little bit, so that doesn't include all the names that are part of this project. But one of the interesting things with range shifting species is, we don't have large latitudinal gradients in the Pacific Islands, right? So we're not really that worried about species shifting towards the poles, but we are really worried about species moving around and humans moving them. So we tried to adapt this grant to fit invasion pathways. And this is part of the Climate Adaptation Postdoctoral or CAP Fellows Program. It is the 3rd cohort, so there have been a couple before this one. The idea is to have a cohort of postdocs, and that's 1 per climate adaptation region, so 9 total, and then bring them together to have them do awesome work and help solve some research problems. And going back to that graph I showed you, where species are expected to move towards the poles, up in elevation or to deeper depths, that's kind of your general climate change expectations. But what I didn't tell you was that study found that less than half of the species are actually moving according to those expectations. So we don't really understand why, in a lot of cases, species are shifting their ranges. So that's kind of the focus of this cohort. And we're excited to welcome over the summer Dr. Harmony Yomai to be the postdoc for this project. And she wasn't able to make it today, but if you see her reaching out, please return her call or text or email and talk story about the project and find out what she's working on with range shifting species. And what we're hoping is it gives us a greater understanding of how and why invasive plants are shifting ranges right now and potentially with future climate change. and that's for Hawaii and Mariana Islands. So we're going to be looking at both of those regions. So in thinking about some of the ingredients of success, to wrap this up, I brainstormed this and then I refined this list. I showed the same one at the Maui PES meeting recently. But of course, the first one, committed funding from USGS, Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center, and the Fish and Wildlife Service. They provided funding to hire me and get me going. And then there's been funding from other partners as well. I mentioned the National Climate Adaptation Science Center Range Shifting Grant, NOAA, Forest Service, DLNR, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. So funding has really helped keep this work going. We've had really engaged leadership teams, the core team especially, meeting monthly, and then the science team meeting quarterly after that. One thing to add is that we actually all came together in person last year, which is unbelievable that we pulled that off. From across the Pacific, we came here to Honolulu to talk about Pacific RISC and next steps. I think emphasis on boundary spanning and building stronger relationships has been a key to success. A focus on practitioners, doing as many participatory workshops and forums as we can, translating science. I've heard that our research summaries are being used to help write academic papers, as well as for some of our partners to help communicate what they do and help them justify their own funding. Including a diversity of groups, being interdisciplinary, and then partnerships and collaborations, creating concentric rings that I think have really kind of like spread out from the initial founding members who heard about the Northeast RISC and said, we should do this here. So huge thank you to everyone involved in Pacific RISC. And I just want to finish this off with one slide for future opportunities. And Kelsey Brock didn't have this graph in her article, but I shared a different graph with one line on it for naturalized plants. But I asked if she could break it down into accidental and purposeful. And so purposeful are the ones we're bringing here on purpose. Accidental are the ones that are hitchhiking, for example, like seeds stuck in people's clothes or vehicles that come over, like no one's intending for those species to get here. And when you look at the purposeful introductions, that's what's really taken off here. You know, the accidental is increasing, but not nearly as much. That looks more like an exponential growth curve to me for purposeful. And so as one of my colleagues has put it, we are doing this to ourselves. Like we are causing this problem by bringing a lot of these species here on purpose and not having the best biosecurity that we could have and the proper controls to keep these impacts from happening. So if you look at the difference between those two lines, there's a huge area that we can make a big difference by changing what we do. So again, thanks to everyone here for coming and everyone who's been involved. It's been wonderful to be a part of Pacific RISC the last few years. A huge thank you to all the agencies that fund and host my position in this work. And please join us if you're not a part of us. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Elliot. I think we have a few minutes here. If anybody in the audience has a question, I can kind of kick us off here. I thought that pie chart you showed in the beginning was really jaw-dropping in terms of it was a financial impact from biological invasion in terms of dollars lost. And so my question is, those are the kind of things that raise eyebrows when you start hitting people in the wallet. So that was just for Hawaii, or was it?
I believe that was for Hawaii and the U.S.
Pacific Islands. So if somebody sees that and says, okay, well, and they come to you as an expert and say, what do we do to reduce that number? And you kind of, the last slide kind of highlights that it's biosecurity. But what element of biosecurity could you do to, and how would you put a couple $1 million at that problem? What's the solution to that?
Sure, thanks, Ryan. So there are a number of things, but I'll just focus on a couple. So for biosecurity, there are biosecurity plans in the Pacific. So we have one for Hawaii, the Interagency Biosecurity Plan since 2017, has a lot of great actions in it. Many of them have been done, so things have improved in that regard. But there are many actions that remain undone. And so a clear answer is we need to finish implementing that plan. And that's going to require funding those actions that haven't been accomplished yet. There are biosecurity plans for other affiliated Pacific islands. There's one for Guam that also, I believe, includes Hawaii. And there are biosecurity plans being created for other U.S. affiliated Pacific islands, I think, as we speak. So American Samoa is one of them. I think PI-CASC has been involved and probably helped fund some of those efforts. So having these biosecurity plans is really important. We need better detection methods. eDNA is one approach that's being used more and more. As well, some really interesting work is being done with CRB detector dogs, LFA detector dogs. So they're canines that are trained to find infestations. And, some of these tools are being used at ports. We need to probably expand the use of these tools. And one of the key messages that me and a lot of folks working with invasions point out is that the costs of invasion go up dramatically after a species establishes and spreads and starts to cause impacts. So the most cost-effective place to get it is before it gets here or just after it arrives. Like that, to be cost-effective, that is when you need to get it. So we need to focus on trying to find out what the pathways are. I think I mentioned that. For many species, we don't have a good understanding of what the pathways are, like how they're getting here. Recent work with coconut rhinoceros beetle. I think this was work done for Australia. They looked at all the places where biosecurity have intercepted CRB larvae or adults. And there was like 15 different things and many kinds of things, not just potted plants where they're commonly found or mulch, but plastic bibs was one of the things that were spreading CRB. So we really need a better understanding of these pathways. Plastic baby bibs. We need a better understanding of how stuff is getting here so that we can intercept it and prevent it from establishing.
Okay. All right. Any questions online?
Let's see, there are a couple online from Glenn Beavers. Most recently, what are the known vectors that we are purposefully bringing in invasive species?
So I'll just mention that graph because that focused on plants. But if you look at what are some of the main pathways for invasive species to get to Hawaii and the Pacific Islands, there are some culprits. There's some categories that have a large effect. A couple would be, so for marine ecosystems, ballast water is really important mechanism or pathway for the spread of invasive species. Biofouling would be another. So stuff that's either in the ballast water of the ship that's released in the place that the ship goes, or stuff that is growing and attaches itself to the ship. For plants, the horticultural industry is a big one. And when you think about different policy mechanisms, you can keep all species out unless they've undergone a risk assessment. That's one approach. Or you can let everything in until it becomes a huge problem, and then we can address it. And we do the second one. Like we let 90, I think it's from the BIS, the Big On Invasive Species Committee, the figure that I heard from them was 99% of all plants worldwide can be imported here without a permit. And so that means we lack a lot of policy and regulation to be able to make a difference. And we've got to think about more proactive ways and better risk assessment methods, and how can we change our policy to keep damaging species from getting
in. Yeah, maybe following up to this question. So I don't know much about like how or what is already done for the risk assessment, but like I know like when we all fly in, we have to fill out this form, like in the airplane, for example. Do you have an estimate of how effectful that is, or what kind of difference it makes?
Yeah, okay. I wish I knew, but I don't have knowledge of that kind of data.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I had one. Oh,
I'll see my question for later.
okay.
Okay. All right, so we're just about at time here. Let's give Elliot another hand. Thanks, Elliot. Flew in today, so if he has a question, he hasn't had lunch yet. He'll be hanging out. Now is the time where I usually kind of tee up the next Slice of PI-CASC seminar, but today we have a very uncertain times going on, so I'm going to bring up our executive PI-CASC director, Darren Lerner, to say a couple words about the state of affairs that we are in right now. Yeah.
Yeah, the fun part. Yeah. Yeah. So as Ryan said, we are going to be taking a pause. Pardon me. Yeah, starting, I don't know, tomorrow officially, or the end of today, really. Most people are probably aware that we're facing a possible government shutdown. What you might not be aware of is over the past year, we should have been moving forward in what they call a rebid process. There are 3 regional CASCs, the South Central, the Northeast, and the Pacific Islands, that went into this rebid process. We finished a 5, which actually with a +1 turned into a 6-year period in which we were funded. And then we have to recompete. And so a NOFO, Notice of Federal or Funding Opportunity, went out in 2024. That's a key date. And we submitted a proposal, as did the other 2 regional CASCs, by the deadline at the beginning of February 2025, another key date. That should have been wrapped up through various processes we don't need to talk about, that would then fund, even if it wasn't us, even if there was somebody else that submitted, a host should have been identified by May or June at the latest, 2025. But that entire process has not moved forward. So here we are at the very last day of what is 6 years of funding to be here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the host, together with our partners in Hilo and Guam, et cetera, in theory to continue. We do have a no-cost extension till April, so for all intents and purposes, we can continue to call ourselves collectively PI-CASC until April. There's not a lot of funding behind that. And if you go to our website, maybe later today or certainly first thing tomorrow, you'll find that we have posted, as the other 2 regions, that we're basically going into a closing period and at least just kind of minimal things that we just need to do, right? We have obligations to some grad students, both here at Manoa, at Hilo, in the University of Guam. We're going to continue to meet those obligations for those students into next year. We have well, we're down to more or less 1 person formally paid in the CASC. That'll be Ryan starting tomorrow anyway. I laugh, but it's not funny. But I guess that's the best way to deal with a little bit of stress. Hope you all stick with us. As Ryan said, we're going to put a hold on Slice of Pie. We have a lot of other programs, projects, and organizations that are involved here. We will still be meeting in this room in one way or another, bringing you science and other kinds of opportunities. So stay tuned for that. And hopefully at some point, there is an opportunity for this to get restarted, and for them to actually consider what they've done is decided that they don't honor the original NOFO. And that's why nothing has moved forward. That could possibly kick back into gear. Congress certainly wants to see that kick back into gear. So we have people on our side. It depends on where the conversation goes, and especially after a potential shutdown in a few hours. Not really the happiest way to end this, but we do want to communicate clearly that we're looking for ways to keep going in many different ways. But we'll take a little hiatus from Slice of PI-CASC. Do we have a pie today? No, we have
No pie.
No pie today.
All
We're
right.
celebrating that by not having pie.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thanks. No clapping for that.
No clap. No clap.
Yeah. Thanks for coming today.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Aloha.
Welcome.
Yep.